Yes.
Good evening to all. I welcome you on behalf of Madras Tax Bar to our 135th webinar by Ms. R. Shri Vishwapriya, daughter of Ramesh sir. So today she has chosen to speak on a very interesting topic, and probably I would say quite a little controversial one, but it's great to see a young Turk talk on judicial review of reservation in federal India. So I think this is a very interesting topic, and looks like she has a good presentation also in this entire talk. So all the best to Vishwapriya. And at the end of the presentation, all of you would be given a chance to put their views also. But then you are requested to kindly raise your hands or put in chat box if you have any queries or if you have anything to supplement on. Then you will be unmuted and then you can put in your queries. So we are looking forward to this, and I once again welcome all the advocates and senior advocates who have joined us today. So thank you once again, and all the best to Vishwapriya. Vishwapriya, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Prithvi. Good evening to everyone. So the topic I've chosen for my present webinar today is judicial review of reservation in federal India. So as a student of law, I have strictly confined myself to only the legal point of view that has been adopted by courts in many cases throughout since the beginning of the Constitution. So first of all, it's my privilege. I see it as a privilege to have had this opportunity to be presenting this webinar today. So I will start off with what I'm trying to speak on today. So this is the general layout of my presentation. I've started with the need for reservation. So the intent of the makers of the Constitution in providing provisions for reservation. So within that, there's Articles 14, 15, and 16. What is the aim of the reservation? And I've also differentiated between equality in law versus equality in fact. Then I've moved on to the judicial review of reservation, which essentially is can also be called as the evolution of reservation, because there's that reservation as such is an ocean. There's so many judgments, so many interpretations, so many jurisprudence, schools of thought that comes with reservation. So I've curtailed myself to just judicial review of the reservations and what was the provisions that were being challenged, etc. So in that, I've started with a role of judiciary, early judgments from 1951 to 1976, and then N.M. Thomas and Indra Sani, post Indra Sani, and the most recent, the latest judgment in the Marathas reservation case. And I've concluded with small, with my views and criticisms of the same. So the need for reservation. So in order to first understand why there was a need for reservation, we must see the environment during which the Constitution was drafted. So the Constitution was drafted in the late 1940s, where there was an existence of a strict and deep-rooted social hierarchy. So it was necessary to introduce affirmative actions to remedy the inequality among classes. So Article 14 was drafted into the Constitution, which provides equality of all before law. So that in the sense, there cannot be equality of law without remedying the inequality that exists among the classes, which is due to the history of social hierarchy and discrimination. So the same is embodied in our preamble as well. So our preamble says to secure to all its citizens equality of status and of opportunity. So accordingly, it confers on all citizens a fundamental right to equality and to be free from discrimination based on sex, race, religion, caste, etc. So the objective of these affirmative actions is to mitigate the inequalities between the communities that have existed since time immemorial, that we could say. In order to mitigate these inequalities is why the need for reservation first arose. So it can be said that the right to equality is twofold. One is the government will refrain from discrimination, and two, the government will ensure absence of future discriminatory practices. So these two dimensions of right to equality can be is embodied in Article 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. It is also guided by the directive principles of state policy in the form of Article 46, which is a directive that states that for the promotion of educational and economic interests of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other weaker sections, special measures can be taken. So this is the basis for the need for reservation in India as such. So Article 14, I've just reproduced what Article 14 says. It says equality before law. The state shall not deny to any person equality before law or the equal protection of laws within the territory of India. And I've also reproduced Article 15.1, which prohibits discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. And Article 16 of Clause 1, which talks about, provides for equality of opportunity in matters of public employment. So before the Constitution was enacted, there was no Section 15 subclause 4, which was inserted later. 16 subclause 4, Article 16 subclause 4 states that nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any provision for the reservation of appointments or posts in favor of any backward class of citizens, which in the opinion of the state is not adequately represented in the services under the state. So within Article 16 itself, there is a provision under 16.4 to provide for affirmative actions for in favor of any backward class of citizens. So this is Article 46, which is the directive. The state shall promote with special care the educational and economic interests of the weaker sections of the people, and in particular of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and shall protect them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation. So with this reading of the sections, I have concluded that the aim of reservation is, one, to advance the backward classes, and two, to ensure that there is adequate representation of backward classes in services under the state. So how can this be achieved? This has been mentioned in the DPSP, Article 46, by protecting them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation. So with that, I move to what is equality in law versus equality in fact. Article 14, as we just saw, prohibits all kinds of discrimination. So this is equality in law. However, if you see equality in fact, all legislative in light of equality in fact, all legislation differentiations is not discriminatory. So there is a reasonable test of classification. So the test of reasonable classification states that there must be intelligible differentia, which distinguishes others from the subject of the special measures, and the differentia must be rational in relation to the aim sought to be realized. So, so it provides for classification. Equality in fact. So the main equality in fact, how I can summarize equality in fact is by saying that treating everyone the same does not necessarily lead to equality. So there are, like I mentioned earlier, there are social hierarchies, discriminations that the certain groups of people have been subjected to. So it would be, equality in law would be essentially treating unequals on an equal footing, so which will lead to further inequality. So there must be the courts have the courts must adopt a substantive equality. So substantive equality recognizes that identical treatment in unequal circumstances would amount to inequality when certain groups have been historically subordinated and discriminated. So in light of equality in fact, affirmative actions finds a place in equality in fact. So it also imposes an affirmative duty to remedy existing inequalities. So equality in fact involves the necessity of differential treatment in order to eliminate the inequalities. So which is embodied in Article 15 subclause 4 and Article 16 subclause 4. So Article 16 subclause 4 permits only reservation of appointments or posts, which is later revolved. And Article 15 subclause 4 allows for any special provision. So it is more of a general protection. Therefore, equality in fact is what the Constitution aims to achieve by eliminating the inequalities. So then I'll move on to, so this is why reservations are designed to achieve equality in fact and to disappear with the inequalities. So reservations have been seen as a temporary measure. Once its purpose has been served, it will disappear with the inequalities as well. So Article 15 subclause 4, 16 subclause 4 are enabling provisions for the government to take appropriate action. So now I move on to judicial review of reservations. What is the need for judiciary to intervene in matters of reservation policy in the first place? So the courts envisaged the possibility of cumulative reservations granted to backward classes may lead to monopolization of all available positions. So which is against the spirit of equality. So this would be inconsistent with the legislative intent of granting reservations. So it was not envisaged by the Constitution to provide 100% reservations, we can say that. Because this also finds footing in Dr. Ambedkar's speech while in debates while the Constitution was drafted. He has said that authorized reservations must be confined to a minority of seats. So what is minority of seats, etc., I will discuss as I move on with the presentation. So they have also invoked jurisdiction under Article 13 to decide on matters of policy reservations. So they have developed various guidelines over the year in indicating the extent of permissibility of the reservations. However, the judiciary, while adjudicating these kind of matters, have mostly restricted themselves with the legislative intent of the
Mr. Shankaran Narayanan, I think there are some scribblings. Okay, you can now proceed. Yeah.
Yes. So the courts have developed a lot of guidelines indicating the permissibility of the extent of reservations. So the judiciary in deciding matters of reservation have only restricted themselves to whether the legislative intent of the enactment are in conformity with the constitutional goals. So with that, this was State of Madras versus Champagam Dorarajan was the first case to be decided on reservation. So this was a 7-judge Supreme Court bench which held that the communal order of State of Madras, the then State of Madras, reserving seats for various caste groups in state educational institutions as unconstitutional. So the state justified the order on the, so I have to reiterate that Article 15 subclause 4 was not inserted in the Constitution. It was only after this case that Article 15 subclause 4 was inserted. So the order was justified on the basis of Article 46. So the government, this was the defense of the government. The court, however, held that a non-enforceable directive could not override a fundamental right. So to override this decision, the Parliament enacted the first constitutional amendment and inserted Article 15 subclause 4, which states that nothing in this article or in clause 2 clause 2 of Article 29 shall prevent the state from making any special provisions for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens or for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So next comes M.R. Balaji versus State of Mysore. So once section 15.4 was inserted, the issue of sealing of the percentage of reservations and determination of backward classes arose. So with that, in that context, M.R. Balaji versus State of Mysore was first decided. So the brief facts of case are, the case is that there was a reservation of 68% seats at a technical institution under Article 15 subclause 4 for socially and educationally backward classes identified solely on the basis of caste. So this was challenged. Since it was solely identified on the basis of caste, it was challenged as violative of Article 16 subclause 1, as a violation of Article 15 subclause 1. So the 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court, they struck down this classification and laid down certain principles. So the principles laid down in Balaji are as follows. First, they have held that backwardness must be both social and educational. Caste, they've held that though caste is a relevant factor, it cannot be a sole criteria that determines backwardness of a particular group of people. Provisions under Article 15.4 should be reasonable. So this, by stating that provision under Article 15.4 should be reasonable, they're essentially stating that Article 15 subclause 4 is an exception to Article 15 subclause 1. So, and through this, because of this, they've also imposed a maximum cap on reservation at 50%. So Article 15 subclause 4 was seen as an exception to the general right of equality. So next comes the case of C.A. Rajendran versus Union of India. This was a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court, which upheld the identification of social and economic backwardness that exclusively had a list of castes on the ground that castes included therein wherein the fact wholly and educationally, socially and educationally backward. And then, finally, in T. Devdasan versus Union of India, there was, ever since the introduction of a reservation in, sorry, I'll start again. It challenged the validity of a carry forward rule. So what is the carry forward rule? So supposing there are 100 posts, out of which 50 posts are for the reserved category, in a given year, only for some reason, only 30 out of 50 reserved posts are filled. So in the following year, the 20 vacant posts in the reserved category can be carried forward. Therefore, the total reserved seats in the year would be 70. So this essentially is exceeding the limit that has been fixed in Balaji as 50%. So following the principles laid down in Balaji, the carry forward rule was held unconstitutional and violative of Article 16.1 in this case. So till 1976, the general understanding or the constitutional understanding of 15 subclause 4 is that it is an exception to Article 15 subclause 1, and parallelly 16 subclause 4 is an exception to Article 16 subclause 1. So, however, it recognizes that affirmative action is constitutional by virtue of Article 15.4 and 16.4. Both operated as exceptions to equality and non-discrimination provisions of Article 15.1 and 16.1. So, with this, with this judgment, that is State of Kerala versus N.M. Thomas, there was a shift in how Article 16 and Article 15 was interpreted. So, in this case, and also till 1976, any kind of classification on the basis of race, caste, sex, etc., was considered to be unconstitutional. So, in State of Kerala versus N.M. Thomas, there was a 7-judge Supreme Court bench which examined a government order which granted provisional promotions to SC/STs who did not have required qualifications with a 2-year grace period to gain those qualifications. So, this was challenged. It was held that equality under Article 16.1 itself includes the remedial action or the affirmative action to ensure representation for backward classes. So this would essentially mean that 16 subclause 4 is an enhancement of what is being said in Article 16 subclause 1. So there was also the issue of caste, strict caste-based classification. To that, the Supreme Court has said scheduled castes were not the same as caste under Article 16 subclause 2. Under Article 16 subclause 2, there cannot be any discrimination based on caste, race, religion, sex, etc. So they distinguished saying that scheduled castes were not the same as caste under Article 16 subclause 2, but can be called backward classes within the meaning of Article 16 subclause 4. So therefore, in this case, with this case, the jurisprudence of interpreting the right to equality has shifted from it being an exception to the rule, then it was seen as the means to achieve the ends. So now with this decision, the issue that came up was how do you identify the backwardness? So in order to identify backwardness, the Constitution has already provided that scheduled castes and scheduled tribes will be notified by the president. And for the purposes of identifying backwardness, for the purposes of identifying other backward classes, the then government set up the Kelkar Commission. So the Kelkar Commission was set up in 1953 to determine the criteria to be adopted while determining socially and educationally backward classes. So it came up with 6 indicators. So 1, traditional occupation and profession, literacy, population, distribution and concentration, social position in caste hierarchy, representation in government services, and also in the private sphere. So this was, however, the recommendations of the Kelkar Commission was, however, rejected in 1961, and the states were permitted. So states were given the power to draft its own list of backward classes. So then came the Mandal Commission. So this is one of the most controversial reports that a commission has ever given, and it led to a subsequent challenge of the same in Indira Sahni, which is the constitutional authority. And so I would give a brief history of what was the report in Mandal Commission. So the Mandal Commission proposed 11 indicators of social and economic backwardness based on social, educational, and economic indicators. So they were further divided into these 3 categories. And I've just picked out a few of them. So in relation to social indicators, caste and classes considered backward by others was taken into consideration. Caste and classes depending upon the manual labor for livelihood. So in the context of educational indicators, the percentage of school attendance, the number of dropouts, how many students reach matriculation. And with respect to economic indicators, they have taken one such example is value of the family assets, etc. So in these 3 indicators, social indicators were given 3 points each, educational indicators were given 2 points each, and economic indicators were given 1 point each. So the test to determine the backwardness is if any backward class scored a score of more than 11 in any of the in these indicators, it would be classified as backward class. So it further recommended criteria to identify other backward classes and also from non-Hindu population. So backward classes mostly from majorly Hindu population. They've also recognized that even backward classes from non-Hindu populations must be recognized. So on the whole, the report found out that 52% of the country's population was comprised of backward classes. So in line with what was held in Balaji, that is the 50% ceiling, it had actually initially recommended 52% reservation, that is equal to the percentage of the population of OBCs. But however, since there was a bar of 50% in by way of Balaji, it recommended 27% reservations for OBCs, along with existing 22% reservations for SCs, scheduled castes, and 7.5% for scheduled tribes. So it is with the implementation of Mandal Commission report that it was required to be tested constitutionally. So the then government in 1990, they implemented the reservation on the basis of recommendations of the Mandal Commission. So they implemented the 27% reservations to socially and educationally backward classes for jobs in central services and public undertaking. So in Indira Sahni versus Union of India, what was challenged in Indira Sahni is the implementation of the Mandal Commission report. So a 9-judge bench examined whether the recommendations given by the Mandal Commission could be accepted. So it was majorly upheld subject, and the court also laid down certain principles after that, following the decision. So it was majorly it affirmed that Article 16 subclause 4 is an emphatic restatement of Article 16(1) and not an exception. So it confirmed what was held in N.M. Thomas. Sorry. So it essentially affirmed that Article 16(4) is an affirmation of Article 16(1). On the issue of identification of backward classes, it held that classification based on caste is permissible. So earlier, legislations granting reservation was rejected because the criteria for identifying the backward class was solely based on caste. However, in Indira Sahni, classification based on caste was held to be constitutionally permissible because the court treated backward classes as a collection of certain castes. And these castes were invariably socially and educationally backward. So caste could be taken as even the dominant criteria while choosing a particular class of people as backward, even a particular caste of people as backward. So the basis of, with this, they've also held that the basis of remedial measures must also be on the basis of caste, which has been discriminated against. So with this judgment, the court introduced the concept of creamy layer. So who are creamy layer? So those members of socially backward classes who are not actually socially backward are creamy layer. So through this judgment, it exempted the creamy layer for exemptions. The rationale behind exempting creamy layer is that creamy layer, those belonging to the creamy layer they are not backward. So hence, under the guise of Article 16 subclause 1 and 15, Article 16 and 15, they could still gain reservation. So unless they are excluded from the view of the government, view of the government while calculating and implementing reservations, it cannot be. It will lead to further violations of equality. So, however, this exemption was not extended to the SCs and STs and was only confined to the other backward classes. So then the court upheld the 50% cap of reservation that was held in Balaji on the ground that power under Article 16 subclause 4 must be exercised reasonably and fairly. So beyond this, what is reasonable, what is fair was not discussed by the court in this case. And it just upheld what was held in Balaji. So more than 50%, but at the same time, it gave for extraordinary cases where it provided for more than 50% when there was a certain case of extraordinary cases. So extraordinary cases, as given the judgment is, it might happen that in far-flung and remote areas, the population inhabiting those areas might, on account of their being out of the mainstream of national life, in doing so, while, however, it has also said that in doing so, extreme caution is to be exercised and a special case must be made out. So this was what was, this is considered not to be an exhaustive list, but a direction as to what could constitute extraordinary cases. So then on reservation and promotion, there was also an issue of whether reservation and promotions is allowed by way of Article 16 subclause 4. In this judgment, it says disallowed reservation and promotions under Article 16 subclause 4. So it has invoked Article 335. So Article 335 basically says that the claims of the members of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and shall be taken into consideration consistently, but at the same time, it must also consider and maintain the efficiency of the administration. So as far as that is preserved, the state was free to make reservations. But in this case, this was held later, but in this case, it disallowed reservations and promotions. So then I will move on to post Indira Sahni. So after the judgment in Indira Sahni, there were other issues that cropped up. Now, there was the basis of reservation, level up to which the reservation is permitted, quantum of reservation with respect to each backward class, and so on and so forth. So in response to Indira Sahni, the center also introduced Article 16.4a and 16.4b. So, so by way of the 77th Constitution Amendment, the center inserted Article 16 subclause 4a, permitting the government to make reservations in matters of promotion to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So I have reproduced what section 4, clause 4a says. Excuse me. Nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any provision for reservation or classes of posts in the services under the state in favor of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, which in the opinion of the states are not adequately represented in services under the state. So this led to now that reservations and promotions was allowed, there was a peculiar situation. So what happened was, there's A and B. A belongs to the general category and B belongs to the reserved category. And both are in the same level. However, A is a few years senior to B, that is the reserved category. So when the time for promotion comes up, it so happens that the promotion is only available in the reserved category. So what happens is B, who is the junior of A, is elevated to is promoted to the next level, say from level 3 to level 4. Though despite A being a few years senior to B. So here what happens was, so the question arose as to whether consequential seniority for reserved candidates is assumed. So, so the essential test was so now that B has been promoted and A is promoted later on after B has been promoted, what will happen? The question was whether A would regain his seniority over B. Since if in a normal circumstances, if there was no reservation, A would have been promoted first and then B would have been promoted. So the question was whether A would regain his or her seniority. So this was challenged in Ajit Singh versus State of Punjab. So the court examined the validity of consequential seniority being assumed for reserved candidates. So in this case, it was held that senior general candidates who are promoted after SC/ST candidates would regain their seniority over general candidates who were promoted earlier because there was a vacancy in the reserved category. And then there was the 81st Constitution Amendment. By way of the 81st Constitution Amendment, in 2000, Article 14B was inserted, which affirmed the carry forward rule. So the carry forward rule, as I explained earlier, is when there is a vacancy in a particular job or education for whatever reason, some seats go unfilled, the state is empowered to, the state has the power to carry forward the reservation to the next, those seats to the next year as well. So this will, as it was stated in Indira Sani, 50% ceiling will not apply to will not apply in cases of the carry forward rule. So, states could carry forward unfilled vacancies from the previous years. So this was also inserted into the constitution. And then by way of the 85th Constitutional Amendment, Article 16(4)(a) was amended and it introduced consequential seniority to promoted SC and ST candidates, which was struck down in Ajit Singh versus State of Punjab. So it essentially overturned what was held in Ajit Singh versus State of Punjab and granted a consequential seniority even to the promoted SC/ST reserved candidates. So then I move on to M. Nagaraj versus Union of India. So this is a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court that examined the challenges to Article 77, 81 and 82 constitutional amendments as a violation of basic structure. So on the whole, the Supreme Court upheld the validity of all the 3 constitutional amendments, and it also laid down the following principles. So it said Article 16(4)(a) and 4(b) flows from Article 16(4). So it is based on backwardness and inadequacy of representation, which enables the state to provide for reservation in consonance with Article 335. So in this judgment, the application of creamy layer was extended to the SC/STs as well. In the previous case, it was not. It was limited to other backward classes. So on the extent of reservation, it said that states must show the existence of compelling reasons of backwardness and inadequacy of representation and keep in mind the overall administrative efficiency before making a reservation. So it also said that the state must collect quantifiable data to prove backwardness of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in cases of reservations, in promotions. So then on carry forward rule, it held that the carry forward rule is valid and exempted from the 50% cap on reservations. So in this judgment, it can be said that the catch-up rule, it was also said that the catch-up rule and carry-forward rule are not constitutional requirements. They're not within the meaning of Article 16. They're judicially evolved concepts to control the extent of reservation. So they do not find any footing in the Constitution as such. It has only developed in the service jurisprudence. So the insertion of these kind of jurisprudence in the Constitution does not necessarily violate the basic structure of the Constitution is what was held. So then comes the 93rd Amendment. So in by way of 93rd Amendment, the Constitution, by way of the 93rd Constitutional Amendment, Article 15 subclause 5 was inserted. So Article 16 subclause 5, based on what was said in Article 15(5), so it provides nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any special provision by law for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens or for the scheduled castes or scheduled tribes, insofar as the special provisions relate to their admission to educational institutions, including private educational institutions, and so on and so forth. So with the strength of Article 15 subclause 5, the government enacted what was known as the Central Education Institutions Reservations and Admission Act 2006. So this majorly dealt with admission to central government institutions. So essentially under the act, 15% reservation was granted to scheduled castes, 7.5% was granted to scheduled tribes, and 27% was granted to other backward classes. So who would determine who would determine OBCs was left with the central government. So this was challenged in Ashok Kumar Thakur versus Union of India. The challenge in Ashok Kumar Thakur was the 2006 Act and as well as the 93rd Amendment. So the 93rd Amendment was challenged in violation of basic structure. So since the challenge was in the context of the Central Education Act, Central Educational Institutions Act, the court majorly limited its decision to only the central government institutions and or aided or those institutions that are aided by the central government. So it excluded the scope of unaided educational institutions by stating that that is not under challenge, and this would be left for a future case. So the court in this case majorly relied on Keshavananda Bharati to uphold the validity of Article 15 subclause 5 and subsequently the Act. So I just extracted a portion of it. The variability of changing conditions may necessitate the modifications in the structure and design of the rights, but the transient characters of formal arrangements must reflect the larger purpose and principles that are continuous and unalterable thread of constitutional identity. So essentially, on the whole, the articles 14 to 16 should not be violated. There could be enhancements of the same, which cannot amount to violation of the basic structure. So this is in this is with the evolving changes that is happening in the society. So where new principles may have to be adopted, new forms of reservations may have to be introduced, which was the
happened? You are frozen. You're not able to hear. You are frozen. She is rejoining. There is some problem. She'll be rejoining now. Let us wait.
I think some power failure issue.
Yeah, I think she has joined back.
I see
One minute.
that.
I will enable screen sharing also.
If there's
Sir,
a
even I'm having power failure.
am I still visible?
Here he is visible.
Yeah, you are good. You can share.
ரெயினால நிறைய இடங்கள்ல power failure.
Yes.
I was talking about how Article 15(5) was upheld on the basis of Keshwananda Bharati. So it was held that the 93rd Amendment does not violate the basic structure so far as it relates to state-maintained institutions, that is state-maintained institutions and aided institutions. So with respect to private unaided institutions, it was avoided. It was excluded from the scope of the judgment. So it was held that the Act only applied to central government institutions. So it also reiterated that the principles of Indira Sani applies to Article 15(4) and 15(5) as well. So if OBCs are to be determined with reference to caste, the creamy layer must be excluded. And non-exclusion of non-exclusion of creamy layer from socially, economic, and backward classes would amount to violation of Article 16 subclause 1. So it overturned the decision with respect to application of creamy layer to SC/STs by stating that creamy layer will not apply to SC/STs because they are a separate category in itself under Article 341 and 342. So the question of creamy layer applying to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes does not arise. So the court, how will the backwardness be determined? So the court directed the government to specify the basis for the exclusion, which could be on the basis of income, the extent of holding of these people, or any other criteria. And it has also said that these criteria must be reviewed every 5 years. So to sum up, if backward classes are determined on the basis of class, on the basis of solely based on caste, the creamy layer amongst them must be excluded, and the reservations must be less than 50% in the case. If these requirements are met, essentially there is no ground for challenge in the court. Then there is Jarnalal Singh versus Lakshminarayan Gupta, which is a 2018 judgment, which sought for a review in the Nagaraj judgment on the issue as to whether states have to, like in Nagaraj, it was held that the courts, the states have to provide quantifiable data which measures the backwardness of these scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. However, this was what was challenged. So it was held that this ruling is per inquirium Indira Sani, because in Indira Sani it has said that they are separate categories by being scheduled caste or scheduled tribe, they are entitled to promotions. So there is no it means that they are backward. So there is no need for quantifiable data to prove their backwardness. So it held that SCs and STs are per se to be considered backward, and there is no necessity for states to conduct any exercise to determine their backwardness. So the precondition of determining adequacy of representation is already been provided in Article 16 subclause 4. So there need not be a further requirement or a condition in order for them to qualify for promotions, reservations in promotions. And in this case, creamy layer was again extended to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes as well. So now, ultimately, I've come down to the latest judgment of the Supreme Court in J.S.T. Lakshman Rao Patil versus the Chief Minister, which is also known as the Marathas reservation case. So what was the main challenge in this case? So the Maharashtra government had enacted an act which provided for 16% reservations for Marathas in excess of the 15% cap. So this was what was challenged in the Supreme Court. So this was a 5-judge bench decision in the of the Supreme Court, which struck down the 2018 Act. So in doing so, it held that it looked at the data available for the data that was available to prove the backwardness of this Maratha communities. So after examining that, it held that Marathas are adequately represented in service. There was no extraordinary circumstances made out to grant reservations exceeding the 50% cap. So they have reaffirmed what was held in Indira Sahni by stating that percentage of 50% has been arrived at on the principle of reasonability and achieves equality as enshrined by Article 14, of which Article 15, 16 are facets. So at the same time, it is saying that there must be a balance between the provisions of Article 15 and 16. Article 15 is a clause 4 and 16 is a clause 16 is a clause 1. At the same time, it's also saying that Article 15 and 16, 16 is a clause 4 and 15 is a clause 4 are nothing but facets of Article 16 is a clause 16.1 and 15.1. So there was also a challenge to the Constitution Amendment. It said that since states don't have the power to classify backward classes with the advent of the 102nd Constitution Amendment, it was held that the state had no power to classify Marathas, to classify 16% reservation for the Marathas. So I have examined what was the 102nd Constitution Amendment. It inserted Article 338B, which provides for a commission for the SCBCs to be called as the National Commission for Backward Classes. So it gave a constitutional footing to the National Commission for Backward Classes. And it also inserted Article 342A, which empowers the president to specify socially and economically backward classes in various states and union territories. So I've just extracted 338B1. There shall be a commission for socially and economically backward classes to be known as National Commission for Backward Classes. It has also provided what will be the composition, what will be the roles under Article 338B. So now Article 342A talks about socially and educationally backward classes. So it has essentially empowered the president in respect of any states to notify or to determine the backwardness of classes of people. So it also states that Parliament may by law include in or exclude from the central list of socially and educationally backward classes specified in a notification issued under 334(2)(a)(1). So as this was what was in, there was an interpretation of Article 342A in the judgment. So it said that with the 102nd, what the court said was with the advent of 102nd Amendment, the central government alone is empowered to identify socially and educationally backward classes and include them in the common list to be published. So earlier, there were two lists, center and state. Center used to prepare its own list of backward classes. State used to prepare its own list of backward classes. So now, by interpreting that the central list in Article 342A subclause 2 would mean a central or a general or the only list that would determine socially and economic backward classes, it has held that only the center has the power to introduce a particular group of people or a caste or a class or a caste as educationally and socially backward. So this was the reasoning that was given, one of the reasonings. However, it also said that the power of states to make reservations will remain undisturbed. So it said that till such a list, so it has directed the president to expeditiously come up with a central common list which would identify all the backward classes. And till such a list is notified, the two lists, that is the list maintained by the states, will also continue to operate. So this is what was very briefly saying what was held in, I've briefly said what was held in the Marathas reservation. So with that, with the decision in So in the Maratha's case, it also declined to revisit Indira Sahni, which imposes the 50% ceiling. So this was challenged because there was a excess of 50% cap that was being challenged. And all right. So, in light of the decision in Maratha reservation case, there's a local example that is in Tamil Nadu. A particular legislation provides for 69% reservation in the state government jobs and educational institutions. So, in order to protect it from judicial review, this was placed under the 9th schedule. So, what this act basically provides is 30% reservation for backward classes, 20% for the most backward classes and denotified communities, and 18% for scheduled castes and 1% for scheduled tribes. So the total reservation percentage goes to 69%, which is in contradiction to what was held in Indira Sahni, which is the 50% ceiling limit. So there was also an issue of whether this Tamil Nadu legislation could be subject to judicial review, given that it was placed in 9th schedule. However, in IR Coelho versus State of Tamil Nadu, it was held that 9th schedule items are not immune to judicial review as it is a part of the constitution. So in this case, the court has also introduced a cutoff date. So any legislation that is that has been introduced before 25th April 1973 will be saved from judicial review. But any law that is included in the 9th schedule, which is enacted after April 1973, will be subjected to judicial review. So the same has been challenged before the quotas law has been challenged before the Supreme Court, and the bench that was taking up the issue has stated that they have stated that they would wait until a decision in the Maratha quota law was made. So in light of what was decided in Maratha, which upheld the 50% ceiling, which was further upheld what was held in Indira Sahni, what would happen to the reservation law in Tamil Nadu will be decided upon. So very briefly, like with what I have covered so far, I've confined my views to two areas. One is on the 50% rule and on the determination of backward classes. So on the 15% rule, as we have seen, the 50% cap was first introduced in M.R. Balaji case when 16.4 was regarded as an exception to Article 16.1. So in order to, in the spirit of equality, there must be a maximum cap. So that was the intention behind granting 50% as the ceiling. So this was later, what M.R. Balaji was later overturned in N.M. Thomas. So where the majority held that Article 16.4 is a facet, which is an emphatic restatement of Article 16 clause 1, which means that the Constitution emphasized substantive equality. So as we've seen, substantive equality means that substantive equality recognizes that there are inherent social hierarchies, there are discriminations, so and inequalities. So in order to mitigate those inequalities, protective or affirmative actions must be introduced in order to fulfill the vision of equality of all before law, that is Article 14. So, so by stating this, the reasoning given in M.R. Balaji was that it is an exception. But in this, since it is a part of 16 subclause 4, 15 subclause 4, 15 subclause 1, there is no, the 50% cap is no more reasonable. So in Indira Sahni, however, 50% cap was upheld, provided there was an exception of extraordinary cases. So later on, in light of Indrasani, the courts have tried to maintain that there must be a balance between Article 16 subclause 4 and 16 subclause 1. So, and that they must be balanced against one another in order to achieve true equality, which was contrary to what was actually held in Indrasani. Indrasani, because since it upheld what was held in N.M. Thomas, 50% reservation, the ceiling of 50% reservation is no longer relevant. So in my humble opinion, I think the courts may have to consider a percentage that reflects the actual reality, the equality of, in light of equality of facts. It must calculate a percentage that it must revisit the cases, and it must lay down a maximum cap that reflects the extent of the disadvantage that is being faced in the areas of reservation. So that is my view on on the 50% rule. And determination of on the issue of determination of backward classes. Earlier, like I said, both center and states would prepare separate lists of backward classes. So in a state, groups that have been mentioned under the central list will be eligible for reservations to central government and educational institutions, central government jobs and educational institutions. And groups mentioned in state lists will be allowed for reservations in state government jobs and educational institutions. So now, with the latest decision in the Marathas reservation case, it has been held that the power to identify socially and the power to identify backward classes is vested only with the center. So this means that the state no longer has the power to recommend, to determine what is socially and economic backward classes. So the dangers of this would mean there might be particular castes of, there may be indigenous communities within a particular state which may go unnoticed or which may go unrepresented if the state has full power to decide on who is socially and economically backward. And it was also not the legislative intent behind introducing Article 342A to remove or curtail the powers of the state to determine the backward classes. So the Supreme Court in the Marathas reservation case has interpreted the central list to mean the only list. So instead of seeing it in the context, so it must actually central list. There's central list and state list as per the 7th schedule. So instead of seeing the term central list in light of that, they have interpreted central list to mean the only list that would govern the identification of backward classes. So and it also read the court also read Article 342A. In line with Article 342, 341 and 342, which empowers the president to determine scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, which is against the practice that has been followed for past 6 decades, where both states and center have collaborated in determining who are backward and in identifying the backward classes. So in my view, this breaches upon the principle of federalism, where by way of the decision in the Marathas reservation case, the power of the states to determine backward classes have been taken away. So with that, I would like to conclude my presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Vishwapriya. You can close your screen share. Whoever wants to share their views, you can just raise your hand so that I will unmute them. Many of our people have gone, the power has gone in many of the places. So many people have sent the messages that they will not be able to continue. And some people, even our Prithvi said the area is totally dark. And that is why he has asked me to continue. So just a minute, let me check who has raised the hand. Satish Sundar, you can unmute and...
Yeah, can you hear me, Vishwa?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Uncle.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to know, has the Supreme Court examined the in any of the cases on the question of economic criteria being economic backwardness being a criteria for determination of backwardness or for reservations? Any of the judgments?
So the 103rd constitutional amendment brings about 10% reservations based on the economic criteria. So I've purposefully avoided that topic because it could lead to controversies. So I've avoided mentioning that.
That is okay. You don't have to mention that. There is no need for any controversy in this. I just want to know what is the take of the Supreme Court on this issue. Has the Supreme Court taken a considered call on this issue in any of the judgments which you have now cited? That is what I wanted to know. Was that a matter for discussion by the Supreme Court?
In the Marathas case?
In the Marathas case or any other case? In the earlier cases, because you started off with Champakam Durai Rajan.
Yes.
That is in 71 Supreme Court. You covered the judicial history of reservations very beautifully. I'm very happy about it. But I've been also looking up some judgments on this question of economic criteria as a benchmark for backwardness, determination of backwardness. I am not able to exactly lay my hand on any judgment of the Supreme Court on this aspect. There are some judgments of the high courts under Article 226, etc., etc. But I am not able to lay down any finder. Yeah.
Can I supplement her?
Yeah, please.
Look for judgments on creamy layer that will answer your question.
Creamy layer.
Yes.
Okay, but any particular judgment which
by the Supreme Court, the three judgments she referred to, and creamy layer is defined in the judgment itself, which talks about economic criteria.
Right.
That is
So
how
So the criteria for determining creamy layer or non-creamy layer, the person who belong to creamy layer is based on economic criteria. That is on the basis of their income, the value of their assets,
yes.
among others.
Yeah. Now I have a question for you.
Yes. Yes.
What
sir.
is going to be the impact of the Maratha reservation judgment to reservation in Tamil Nadu now? Now that the judgment has come out.
So
The Tamil Nadu government has now moved the Supreme Court to say that please retain 69% in our case. Don't interfere with the earlier provision given to us, irrespective of whether it is the 9th schedule or not. Though according to the earlier judgment, after 1973, 9th schedule is also subject to judicial review. Now, the Tamil Nadu government has jumped the gun and gone to the Supreme Court and said, please don't touch our reservation. What do you think will the Supreme Court do now after the Maratha judgment?
Okay, so one possible outcome of what will happen to the Tamil Nadu in light of the Marathas case would be that since it has expressly upheld the 50% ceiling, there are chances if the government is unable to prove that the backwardness that they require, they specifically require. I'm sorry, I'll rephrase that. If the government must be able to show data that the backward classes that they're seeking to protect under their reservations are qualified for reservations that exceed the 50% cap.
Now, assuming there is no data.
Assuming there's no data, it will be struck down in light of what was held in. It will be limited to 50%.
So what
There is one point to consider here. When I.R. Coelho said, subject to what Vishwapriya says, because this is my knowledge from law school, I.R. Coelho said that 9th schedule will be subject to touchstone of judicial review only to the extent of basic structure of the constitution. It will not be subject to judicial review on part 3 entirely. So as we all know that basic structure is something more than part 3, because that is what Keswananda Bharti said by overruling Golaknath. So when the Maratha judgment has said that it falls foul of Article 14 read with 15 and 16 because of the equality principle, whether that will be sufficient to even say that the 69% reservation which is there in the 9th schedule will be hit by the basic structure also, because there is something more which has to be proved to say that it violates basic structure and not merely say that it is violative of Article 14. Like that is my view, subject to what Vishwapriya said.
If your argument is to be accepted, I think it was stupid on the part of the Tamil Nadu government to move the Supreme Court even before anything. Absolutely,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Why they are jumping the gun like this?
Will I be permitted to give my opinion on this thing?
Sir, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Since it has been already whether it is immune to the constitutional principle, the part 3 is a debatable constitutional debate, and I don't think the Supreme Court will jump over the gun to strictly abolish the 69% percentage, because in various judgments with regarding the 69% when it was curtailed to 50% in various other states. After the enactment of this act in Tamil Nadu, 69%, various states have gone above the board and had more than 50%. And even in that aspect, the Supreme Court was not particular to curtail that those above 50% reservation within 50%. When that is the case, if at all the Supreme Court decides to curtail it to 50%, means every state which has their own authority, as the speaker told, even though the backward list has to be prepared by the central and the state has their own prerogative in determining whichever class of people comes under the backward class. So the Supreme Court, I don't think will jump over the gun to curtail this thing to 50%, which has been in practice, since it will create more than a great dilemma for the states and also to the court.
I also support your views, sir. In the Maratha case, there are some different reasons were given by the Supreme Court to shut down the amendment. So that you cannot say Maratha judgment is universally applicable to all the state laws which provide more than 50% reservation. So every state law has to be seen independently on its own facts, sir. Maratha cannot be a problem for upholding the Tamil Nadu reservation.
Yeah, I think there are two aspects in this thing. One thing, the 10.5% reservation given to the Vandians may be under scrutiny. But at the second aspect, the 69% cannot be proportionally reduced to 50%, thereby curtailing every section's representation will be proportionally reduced, which cannot be done by the court and also by the state at this juncture.
The test be seen, tested.
Yeah, that is what I meant was it will be struck down in the absence of any data or quantifiable data proving the backwardness of the communities which have been granted reservation more than the 50% ceiling.
I have a question for you, Vishupya. See, Indira Sani, it unequivocally said that there cannot be backwardness in SCs and STs because SCs and STs are a class into itself, because they have been notified under Article 337, 338, I believe, that they are a class into itself. So there cannot be a concept of creamy layer. And Indira Sani was a 9-judge bench. Then after that, Nagaraj and Jarnail Singh, Nagaraj was, I think, 5 and Jarnail Singh was 2. When they say that creamy layer can be read into SC and STs also, are they going again? Are they vulnerable because they are clearly going against what Indira Sani says? At least that is my reading of Indira Sani. And because Indira Sani has unequivocally said that creamy layer cannot be read into SCs and STs because they're a class into itself, then Jarnail Singh and Nagaraj goes against it because of doctrine of stare decisis. Are they going against a larger bench decision? And secondly, ultimately, if Indira Sani, as in this question goes to a larger bench, how sound do you think is the principle of Indira Sani when it says that SCs and STs are a class into itself, so there cannot be a question of creamy layer in that?
All right. So the concept of creamy layer as such is not a principle of equality. It's not embodied in the right to equality. So it's just a criteria to determine to the extent of which reservations can be granted. So that those who are already forward, those who are already educationally and socially forward, can be removed so that the actual weaker sections, those who require the reservations, can have the opportunity to avail the reservations. So that is the purpose of creamy layer, in my opinion.
See, this judgment of Maratha, they have filed a review. So it's too premature to discuss the 69% of the Tamil Nadu government. Because of the review, they've overturned this. Naturally, everything issues open at large. Then a factual coincidence, I don't know, maybe Vishnupriya can, this thing. The ruling government at the time in Maharashtra and the settled government were one and the same party. Okay. And now, right or wrong, Supreme Court says that central government has to decide this. But the article says president has to notify, not the central government. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's assume a situation where there is a president rule in Maharashtra instead of this, same party holding. And if the president had notified this as a backward clause and given this reservation, do you think Supreme Court would have said something different? I repeat,
Yeah.
if the president rule was announced in Mumbai for some reason, and president has notified this, would you, I mean, generally, I'm not talking about any bias about anybody, would, in my opinion, I'm speaking to myself, would the Supreme Court say that it is a correct allocation? Because president has done it. Though the president acts through the governor, it's the extended arm of the president. If you apply this, this Maratha rule, will you justify the conclusion of the Supreme Court in a different way? It looks like an oxymoronish situation, because only the central government is not the criteria. It's the president himself, not his delegated agency. So my view is that this is highly debatable and a very interesting point, but you did a fantastic job, Vishwapriya. Credit goes to your father, debit goes to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Answering that, the court has interpreted president to mean central government. So the list that would be notified by the president would invariably mean what the list that is being implemented by the center.
Okay, anybody else would like to say anything? Yes, Satish.
My take is this: the question of reservations has become more political. It has, of course, engaged the attention of the judiciary for wrong, executive for wrong, and the government. But it has been politicized, much to the disadvantage of the community. One, secondly, determination of backwardness by commissions, by backward classes commission, etc., etc. Has that been given some sort of importance by the Supreme Court in all these decisions? Have they gone? See, of course, they have to gather the data, they have to find out, etc., etc., before they declare, they receive the objections, etc., etc. But has the machinery of this type of commissions, has it been a predominant factor which has been taken into account by the Supreme Court determining the issues?
Yeah, just in the Marathas case itself, there was the report of the Gaikwad Commission. So it was a Gaikwad Commission that identified Marathas as a socially and economically backward class. And yeah, it was based on the Gaikwad Commission's report that, I'm sorry. Yes, so it was based on the report of the Gaikwad Commission that the Supreme Court has held that they are not, they are already being adequately represented, and they are not socially and educationally backward. So it was based on the recommendations of the Gaikwad Commission that the 16% reservation for Marathas were given. So on examination of that, the report of that commission, they have held that the Marathas are not socially and economically backward, and they're adequately represented in services of the state.
So ultimately, the ball is in the judiciary's court, correct?
Yes.
So whether it is a determination by commission, etc., judicial commission, or whatever it is, ultimately the final call is in the judiciary, wherever.
Based on how it has been implemented by the government, which is later challenged.
Because we saw in Mandal Commission's case what happened. There was so much of turmoil, political turmoil. In fact, the government of the day went away.
Suicides, deaths.
Yes. There is so much of this one. But one more question, just on the passing. Will there be any review of the judicial, of the constitutional provisions relating to reservation anytime? By the
in what
Parliament?
context? I would say in the context of the 50% cap, it virtually has no constitutional backing at all. It was only what was merely held in Indrasani that has been upheld in the subsequent cases. So the 50% ceiling as such is not anywhere written down in the constitution.
No, so, I'm also trying, what I want to say is, see, they cannot be eternally backward. They'll have to come, correct? So there should be some sort of provision in the constitution itself, where they should review it after a particular point of time as to who is the person who is backward, etc., whether he needs a protection in terms of Article 16 and 14. There should be some inbuilt machinery. That is what I want to review this.
Radhashekar, you wanted to say something?
First of all, congrats, Supriya. I am Rajshekar, advocate here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
I just followed your presentation and I was just hearing through some of the deliberations of my friends over here. Satish Sundar had pointed out about the data that was available for the courts to come to a decision. Admittedly, this Maratha case, there was a constitutionally appointed commission by the state at that point of time to identify a percentage. They identified certain percentage, which was then reduced by the High Court in Mumbai. And then now it was totally overturned by the Supreme Court, saying that you cannot overreach the cap of 50%. And there was no quantifiable data to show that the Marathas are really backward or not. So I have a small query in that sense. Is it not impinging on the federal setup, as you pointed out, the topic of today, judicial reservation in federal India? Now, India being a total federal setup, the states nominated commission, which provided data to the government for having come out with a reservation percentage, is now being tinkered by the courts. So how much of sanctity does these commissions have now? Because a state nominated commission is not affecting the federal setup. That is one part. And you have also answered that on the aspect of federal setup, it impinges. I'm happy with that. I just want to point out to Satish Sundar on that. The second one, correct me if I'm wrong, this 9th schedule, putting the Tamil Nadu reservation, Coelho judgment. Correct me if I'm wrong, is it now referred to a larger bench of the Supreme Court? On two questions, yourself or Rohan over there, who are keeping abreast with the knowledge of whatever is going on. If I'm not wrong, Coelho is being referred, it has already been referred to a 9-judge bench.
I'm not aware of that.
If Rohan or somebody could pitch in, if they
Rohan,
have
you
some.
can chat. Rohan, if you have any input, you can just put it in the chat message.
Okay, Rohan is not there.
Between Rohan left and then he joined back. I'm not sure whether he's able to.
Because what I'm at the impression that after Coelho's judgment, Coelho found out a stark distinction. It found out that even acts and regulations which were violative of the Constitution in Article 14 and 19, they were put into the 9th schedule. They found it to be really very ambiguous. They said, how can an article or a constitutional law which has been struck down under 14 or 19 be just put under the 9th schedule? So they wanted this question to be answered by the 9th bench. And also on the basic structure doctrine, which Rohan was mentioning. These were the two questions, if I'm not wrong, which was referred to the 9th bench. I'm not sure what happened after that. Even the Tamil Nadu reservation case is pending as such. So what is your take on that? I thought if somebody could share something on that.
I'm not aware of such a challenge. I'll have to look into that.
No, correct me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong. It's out of memory. I'm just saying.
Okay. Can I check it now?
Yeah, no problem. You can take your time. That's okay.
Yeah.
Even later on, there's no hurry. Later on also.
Thank you.
That's all,
Thank
right.
you, Shubhriya. Yeah. Thank you, Shubhriya, for an enlightening presentation. The topic is such a complicated one. In fact, for another forum, I have been preparing for the 15 days. Still, I am not able to read all the judgments involved. So it's such a not only controversial, it has got a very big history and you have taken us through all these provisions. If you see, maybe by way of summary, I can point it out just. If you see the Maratha judgment, almost 6 commissions, as rightly pointed out by Satish also, this issue of reservation is purely a social issue which has to be approached as a social issue. Definitely, there is a need for providing for reservation and for upliftment of the people. But unfortunately, what has become is, it has more become a political issue. That is the whole problem of it. A pure issue which should have been dealt with as a social issue has taken the character of a political issue. And that is why even after 70 years, see, if you see some 6 commissions for this Maratha, almost over the last 50 years, 3 central commissions and the 3 state commissions have said that Maratha community is not a backward community. Considering all the data, the representation, the level of representation, the level of approach to the government, everything factors, 6 commissions, 3 of them state and 3 of them central, have said that they are not backward. But Despite that, the government formed another committee, and the committee, they followed a different criteria and come out to this situation. Now, there are two major issues. One is the 50% cap, how sacrosanct it is. That is one aspect of the matter. There, whether it is this particular decision or even in other decisions also it has been said, wherever there is an exceptional circumstances as pointed out by Indra Shamni, it can definitely breach the 50%. The 50% is not a closed chapter. It can be breached, but there should be an exceptional circumstances. What is that exceptional circumstances? The court has given some guidelines on that, which is always open for the government to interpret and to do whatever they want to do it. That is one part of it. And the another takeaway from this particular judgment is, just because 80% of the population is backward, we cannot say that it is an exceptional circumstance. So we have to give a reservation for 80%, because what is contemplated under Article 16 is not proportional representation. It is adequate representation. Proportionate representation means if your population is 80%, reservation also should be 80%. But that is not what is contemplated under 16. What is contemplated is only adequate representation. So a balance has to be struck between the proportional representation and this adequate representation. So the 50% cap, there is always an exception to that. And which are on the issues which will qualify for that exclusion, it is for the governments to decide, which is also subject again to the judicial review. And coming to the second part, where depriving the state government completely from the power of notifying. Now what they have said, if you read the judgment, if you read the Justice Ashok Bhushan judgment, we will be completely satisfied that all the parliamentary reports, the select committee reports, everything can be used. So whatever has been discussed in that particular committee can be used to show that the state is also having the power. But if you read the Ravindra Bhatt judgment, you will also you will have a totally a turnaround, and how these select committee reports and other parliamentary discussions cannot be relied to come to a particular interpretation. So it is a very good judgment in that particular way. When you read the first part of the judgment, you will be completely satisfied. You will be wondering how the other judge is going to overcome that. But when you read the other judgment of Justice Ravindra Bhatt, you will also be overwhelmed by that particular part of it. It's a very beautiful read it was. So like that, now the state's power to prescribe the list, what is going to happen is also another issue. Certainly, this is not the end of the road. By this particular judgment, all those issues have been solved. So one thing which, as ordinary citizens, without any bias, what we have to think is, we should be in a position, at least in next 25 years, to say that whatever was the purpose of reservation has been achieved. We have achieved equality in that particular society. We should be able to do that. Till that time, all these issues are going to be there. The government also will be involved in this. The courts are also going to be involved. We can only hope that equality, which was thought about by our constitutional framers, even if you are not able to achieve it in the 70 years or 75 years, at least in the 10 to 15 years, viewing this reservation only as a social issue, not as a political issue, we will be in a position to achieve the equality in another 10 years or 15 years. So that is the intention with which all of us have to move forward. And I thank all the participants who have joined us today. And Prithvi is not able to give this final, this one. Just a minute, Rogan. We are under a constitution, but the constitution is what the judges say. Rogan has said something in the chat box. Okay, I thank Vishwapriya for this very enlightening presentation. I thank all the participants for having participated today. As usual, the recording of this session will be put in our YouTube channel also. And thank you all once again. Anybody else would like to say anything before we close?
Thank you, sir. Sorry, and thank you for handling it, sir. My power, there was some problem here in the power supply. And thank you once again all for joining us. So with regard to the previous session, there has been some delay in uploading it on YouTube. Both this session as well as the earlier session, both will be uploaded within 2 days' time. And the link will be shared in the group. So thank you very much once again for joining us today. Thank you, sir. Natarajan. Yes.